So today, guys, we are going to review Overwatch League teams. We're going to be focusing on the West region. In another video, I'll go into East. And then after that, when I do East or another video after, I'll compare East and West and give you my opinion of like the best. But I want to break these down into small videos so it's easy to digest, as well as I can go more in detail into each region. As well as I think each region will have always sort of a meta difference to some extent. Like last season, you sort of saw, Shanghai doing insanely well in their region with Tracer Sombra. And then you saw Atlanta sort of dominating with the Orisa-based comps. I'm also going to try and not be too biased, if possible. Very hard, but I'm going to try not to be too biased. But let's just go ahead and get started. I'm really excited. It's something I've wanted to do. I haven't done this in a lot of other seasons. I've sort of just kept it to myself. So right off the bat, I'm just going to start putting teams that I think are way above everyone else at the very top. It's mainly these four, in my opinion, are just above everybody else. Like, and I'll sort stuff out later, but this is without me even like really thinking about it too much. Not trying to be mean to teams or whatnot, but this is sort of how I would generally look at teams here. I know there's a lot of stuff people are talking scrimbucks. I've heard certain teams are, I'm not gonna say Thoec or anything, but certain teams that maybe lower or higher, or maybe higher teams are doing bad, maybe lower teams are doing insane. But I'm not gonna take into scrimbucks because some teams might have started way earlier scrim wise than other teams, as well as some teams that started just now may be doing really well, or they might be doing really poorly. So in terms of like I think these are the different tiers I'd sort of divide it. We'll start at the bottom. I think probably the bottom would probably go to, I hate doing this, man, but I think it would probably go to Paris, then London, then Florida, then here, something like that. Okay, so it'll look something like this. Now the reason why I'm gonna go through each team really fast. So Paris, I think the issue that they will run into is, first of all, they have a full Korean coaching staff, and obviously Avala can translate. And then they have a roster which has one Korean player and the rest are Western. Yes, you can have someone translate, and you can do that. And being in that environment, I coached in Thoec, a team that pretty much had 3 KR players, and the other 3 were from Singapore, and they spoke English. One of them actually spoke English and Korean, and he would translate sometimes. It was rough. Like, VOD reviews were rough. Everything was just rough. So I think inherently, like this how this is going to work is just going to be difficult. I think some of these players are really good. Khan is a good player. I think Hydro is actually also quite a good player, as well as Vestola. He's quite mechanically not bad. But if you were to put these players into like versus top 5, like are they top 5 in their role? I don't think they would cut that, right? I mean, Khan might be getting close, especially for Western. But if you start comparing them versus like people on Shock, Atlanta, Glads, Shanghai, it's going to be rough. So I think because they have a difficulty of the staff, as well as mechanically, right, going into 5v5, mechanics is also just inherently going to be important because it's a new game. You're going to look at mechanics. People are still figuring out the macro. You can look at any meta. Nobody knows metas instantly. If you look at goats, people started like figuring out new playstyles of goats like very late on. So because of that, I think this is probably going to be one of like the lower teams. I think they do have a chance to get maybe stuff working. I believe they have a team house in NA. I'm not sure, maybe Texas or something. So that'll make things obviously easier for them than it was last year because they were all remote. So because of that, it might go better. It's definitely possible, but I think it's still going to be rough. Then I would probably put Titans next. The reason why I'd probably put Titans next, I think actually Titans mechanically are really, really, really strong. Aspire is a very good player. So is Shockwave. Masa's very capable in Brawl. Seiko, Skyreaper, these are good players. I think some of them obviously aren't as seasoned, right? Like Skyreaper, Seiko, False. So because they have sort of some rookies, plus they also have some like somewhat veteran players, that in itself is going to have to be, you know, work together. A lot of people will probably like, you know, say, oh, you know, the second win staff hasn't done really well, and you know, they haven't like, you know, last season they just haven't made a big of an impact. And I think this will be the season that like we'll actually see, you know, given the budget they had and you know with the roster they were able to get, is the staff able to sort of produce results or at least get, you know, improve. So I think that'll be, you know, something that we'll have to see. Um, Again, I think this is a good roster for what they could get. I think it'll be interesting to see how they work together. And I think one of the other things that I think will be very interesting is one thing that happens with a lot of teams is you sort of like you run into issues, right? And every single Owl team runs into issues. If someone tells you this Owl team has never had issues, they're just lying. There's no way. And any team has had issues. How do you deal with problems as a staff, as a player, as a team? How do you overcome those problems? If you look at multiple teams, right, throughout different seasons, you'll see teams that went down, that went up. My favorite example is Dallas Fuel. They had a really, really, really rough start, right? And I really admire Rush. I think he's a great coach. And he was essentially able to go, you know, down at the start. Like it was a lot of macro fundamentals, he said, especially in I think the Nexus Cup they did. And he just turned it around. And now, you know, and then the middle season started doing really well. So I'm curious to see if they have a rough start or a rough mid, are they able to actually turn it around? So that's why I'm a little hesitant to see, because in the past they haven't been able to do that, whether it's staff, players, whatever. So that's one of the reasons why it's a little bit lower in my books. So yeah, then London, why London is down here, and I think London Titans really close. I think that can be, debated. So London, I believe they also, I think they have a team house. I'm not fully sure. Uh, so yeah, I think the other thing, right, to consider, they have a coaching staff. They have Christopher. Christopher's obviously worked with, you know, really good coaches, really experienced, from top KR teams. My biggest concern with this roster, is actually, to be honest, Poco. Poco hasn't played a lot, and he's not like, he's a seasoned player, he's a veteran, and he brings that veteran experience with us, right? Or with, not with us, but with them. But he hasn't played a lot, so I'm genuinely curious mechanically how is he going to do. And I think D.Va and other, you know, off-tank heroes in Overwatch 2, if you don't play your tank very well, you're going to be punished because you only have one tank. There is no one else to really help you hold space. Reinhardt, you have D.Va DM to help you. You have Zarya Bubble. Now, if it's just D.Va, who else is going to help you? It's inherently more difficult, right? Like you have like if you make a mistake, you're gonna get punished for it. Yeah, maybe you could have Lucio speed boost you out. Maybe you could have Baplamp. Maybe you can have other heroes sort of assist you. But like it's less now, so it's gonna be more punishing. So I'm a little worried mechanically wise. You know, how strong is Poco? I think the other thing that I think is interesting, with this roster, and I'm a big fan of Backbone. I saw Backbone long ago when I was trialing for Triumph, and you know, I noticed how flexible this player is and sort of how flexible this player is. And I definitely think he's really good. And they obviously have a Tracer player, Shax. I think Sparker's also not a bad hit scan. So I think their DPS lineup isn't really, I think it's actually pretty decent. I think it's like easily mid-tier Owl. I'm just more worried about what they end up getting for the backline and then sort of how their tanks work. I think Hadi's also not a bad player. So I'm just worried about that, as well as I think the other thing is their staff isn't bad, right? But I'm curious to see how these three work together, and again, how they solve and deal with issues. Because that's one of my biggest things with lower teams is how do you go through and deal with issues, and how do you like resolve them and improve. So that's what I'm curious to see how they go about that. So again, these two I'd probably say are pretty close. I'd put Florida and Boston a bit more above. Why? So Florida, mechanically, I think Florida has actually not a bad team. Hydron mechanically is very strong. Kariv also mechanically is very strong. Someone also, literally this roster, if you look at it, it's like built on mechanics, which I'm pretty sure is what they were aiming for. My issue why they're lower and they're sort of in like this sort of range here, is literally because it's a mixed roster, and this is sort of how I've always viewed mixed rosters. There are very few coaches that have actually been able to get mixed like rosters to work. So far, it's like left being sort of the best. I mean, again, left being the best, and then the worst being on sort of the right. there are very so back to my point. There are very few like teams that have actually got mixed rosters to work. If you look at them, it's like basically Glads, Shock, and Atlanta to the extent. Actually, not to the extent, like Atlanta. So that's pretty much it. I might be wrong. I might have forgot someone. If I did, my bad. But those are the teams that really have got it, and also those teams have had like and Fusion. Thank you for correcting me. And Fusion. But those are teams that also, if you think about it, have insanely strong coaching staff. Like I think their coaching staff is probably like just one of the best. Like their coaching staff is like top 5 league. Like it's very up there, as well as the players are also just the best. So now where I'm coming with this, right, is if you have like rookies, you have coaches who are still good, but they're not like the best, right? Because you can't compare someone to like Rush or Krusty or Moon, is difficult, right? Like they're known. I'm not saying Gumba is not a good coach, but he also took a long break. So he's got to come back. He's got to prove himself. So that's sort of where I'm sort of like, Florida, Boston is sort of in that. Can they pull it off? And Boston, they did improve last year, in my opinion. Like they were better last year. Laurie did, I think, a decent job with what he had, and I think he improved like decently. So I'm curious to see, with these two teams, how it goes up, or what happens. So Florida, like I said, mechanically really good. I've worked with Majid before. Majid is mechanically cracked. Like he is really, really mechanically good. He is a great player. This was like a really good signing. I think the biggest thing is just teaching a macro and integrating him into a team. And like I said, if you can do that, easy. Like it'll do really well. On the coaching staff, I'm going to be honest, not really sure how I feel about it. It just, I think you have Gumba, who's sort of a leader, who's experienced Overwatch, he's experienced Valorant. McGravy comes from a player POV and probably analytical, and understands how to help players when they go through problems. And Day One, can definitely work with the Korean players, but again, mixed roster, getting communication to work, getting everything to flow and get that high level. That's in my opinion where are they going to be able to get away with it? And my biggest thing is when you have a mixed roster, when something goes wrong, are you able to fix it? What if some of them are doing really poor in scrims and all of a sudden they're doing really well? What if they're doing really well in scrims and all of a sudden doing poor? How are you going to deal with that? That's pretty rough. And obviously, we got to feel bad for Mare. He got dropped recently. That really sucks. I hope another team trials him, or maybe he gets put on in another team. Fingers crossed, because that's really rough. So Boston. Boston, I have to be a bit of a fan. I've coached Faith before, long ago, Global Esports. He's a really, really nice guy, really smart. And I think he's one of the players that I would say he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He doesn't mechanically pop off, but he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and I think that's what gives him a lot of value. And then you've got Punk, which, he's, again, obviously top on leaderboards. Crimzo, Strong, Valentine, Striker, Marvel, MCD, Victoria, Itzal. So what I do think is sort of weird, though, is they have literally 3 tanks. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, unless they're trying to run more Koreans and literally just, basically not put Crimzo in, give him much playtime, and not put Punk in and give him much playtime, which I don't. I think Crimzo is is a really strong player. I remember constantly getting naded by him on repeat when I was a third Impact and we were playing Brawl, and we were rolling pretty much most Owl teams except for top 5, and he was on Envy and he would just throw a nade and we would just lose because his honor was just so good. And I literally Owl top tier Owl honors were not able to do that. And obviously it's an Owl now because he just to be. So I think he's a good player. So I'm curious to see how they integrate this. Obviously, again, Laurie improved, and in my opinion, he did a decent job last year. So I think Boston can only go up. I'm just really, really interested to see how all of this works together. I think Baroy's a smart guy. I've talked to Baroy and worked with him before. I think Laurie's also smart. I haven't worked with Askoff before, so I'm not too sure on him. So I think Boston, that's why I sort of put it in like the middle here. It's sort of a question mark, right? The players, again, sort of mid tier. Coaching staff, not bad, but it's sort of in the mid. So now moving sort of like to B tier, and then we'll go into S tier. So Outlaws. Why is Outlaws here? Let me think about how I want to order these. I think we'll do something. Well, let's talk about them first. So Outlaws. Yeah, maybe I got to move Outlaws a little bit up. Um, they have some really good players. um, I've worked with Hyun before. On Third Impact, I did his one-on-ones. He's really strong mechanically. I even played versus him actually when I was in Pac. And he was on the enemy team, and we pretty much lost to him. So and Pelican's obviously good. Piggy's mechanically strong. Dante's good. Um, Outlaws definitely had a really, and obviously Merit's good, and Lasher's mechanically strong. So I gotta actually put this team more up. I think for the other reasoning, because they only have Dante and it's only one non Korean player, so it should inherently be easier for them to work on things. As well as I think their coaching staff makes a lot of sense. You've got Bishu, who's a player operations and content, and I think that's just really smart. I think this fits the role great for Bishu. Junkbuck, I think came like if anything, Outlaws had a really good start last season, then they dipped and they like sort of came back, but they couldn't. And I think a lot of that is because of the coaching staff. I think Jake on a coaching staff makes perfect sense. I think Ho Chi Lee, I'm not too sure how he fits in there, to be honest. That'll be interesting to see. I believe he's also working part-time remote. So that'll be interesting. But Junkbuck Jake, I think, is actually quite smart. And I think this roster actually has a lot of potential, which is why I'm leaning it to we a little bit. I'd probably put it around here. And I definitely would like being able to compete with the top. It's just like, can they I would say not necessarily can they work together, but can they overcome obstacles? Like I'm assuming they had some obstacle last season that created them issues. As well as I felt like there were certain metas they were very strong at and certain metas they were not strong in. Let's then look at NYXL. So NYXL is interesting. It's really, I don't know. I feel like, they've had their ups and downs, and they're just like a wild card to me. Um, Again, Korean fully a lot of teams that came out of APAC I didn't follow as much, so you know I'm not gonna I'm not too sure on that type of stuff. But I think like Yaki's obviously good. We all know Yaki's good. I think Flora is not bad. Mungbong is like okay. I don't think he's insane. Young Jimjin's also okay. Like I'll be honest, like these players are like okay. They're not like I'll be honest. Like I know people might say it's mechanically nuts, but I don't know. Like I think they're okay. Like Mungbong is like really good at his Ana. His Zen's okay. His Bap's okay. It's like nothing's fancy. And Gundam Jin, if I remember correctly, I think he's known for his like loose his Bap is he's known for his Zen, Bap, Ana, Moira. Again, he was like okay. He wasn't like a big show off or like something that like actually like did really well. So to me, their support line's already really weak. I think Yaki's obviously good. Kellen's not bad, and Floor is like mechanically not bad. So for me to have this roster, really be good, I think they're gonna need someone else on their team to help like uplift it player wise. I don't know too much about their coaching staff except for Kuki. One thing I will say, I don't know what happened with Florida last season, but something I've known or something that I've seen with Florida is they were a very meta specific team, which that they could play one meta well that played to their hero strengths, but after that they could not adapt. Like they just literally couldn't. And that was like really concerning. Like they were just good at one meta and that was it. And they had like not a bad roster. And everyone was like, oh, Florida's good and they're popping off. But if you actually look at results, they were good like during literally when like they had Yaki and BQB like play like Ash and Genji or whatnot. Like they were playing like their best heroes. And when it was anything else and there wasn't meta that actually helped those heroes, they would try playing for them and like it wouldn't work. So that's my issue with like the previous coaching staff. I'm not sure how much of that's Kuki. I'm pretty sure he's a little. I'm not sure how this team runs. But that's a bit of a concern for me. That's why I'm not rating them too high. Because they're not a team, in my opinion, that can play to their strengths and actually have it effectively work in different metas. If you look at teams like Atlanta, Shock, Vlads, and even Dallas, all those teams are able to actually play to their strengths and apply that strength in different metas, even if their composition is not the best, and be able to do it at the highest level. Atlanta, they were playing literally Orisa-based Brawl or Ryan Brawl, but everyone was playing Ball Comp, and they made it work. Shock doing very similar things, made it work, right? Dallas was playing 6-man, if I remember correctly, and then Glads is playing a lot of ball comp. So, which is fine. They play to their strengths. So that's sort of why I'm putting NYXL down there. Toronto, I'm just gonna be honest about Toronto. Toronto's like always invested a lot, but just never had returns, and it's sort of disappointing to see, in my opinion. I don't know too much about KGD. I've heard he's not bad. I do think Moby is a really, really smart guy. I think this is a huge pickup for Toronto. This is like what they need, in my opinion, to like actually like hopefully improve. Yang One, sure. I mean, I know he was with Titans back in the day. It was Toronto before, but I think this is the pickup that they actually need, and this is what they needed to actually improve. And yeah, I know a lot of people like Jurong. But what I'm gonna mention, right, is if you look at even their last roster was like not bad at all, right? They picked up like some of the best players sort of in their role, and it didn't really like pop. It didn't pop off. Like they didn't do insane. So I'm really curious to see what happens with Toronto. I do think they have really good players. I think Hishu's nuts. I think Twilight's very good on certain flex supports. Churong is also very strong. Muse, very good, right? So Hoppa, also very good. So they have really strong players. I'm not sure really where Finale fits in this, but I'm curious. And they have, again, Obi, which will help. So it's very much a wild card, but based off their history and what they've been able to produce, I'm not as convinced, right? Like, I think they could be a team that could easily compete up here, but I'm putting them down here because I haven't seen anything where they've actually like produced results in a positive way. Justice. So Justice, I think in general have had ups and downs, right? They haven't been able to produce results. I think, I'm always going to be a big, Supreme fan, because I believe a lot of their ideology. I think the addition of Idala, which I think they added, is just smart because he's a smart strategic coach. I believe they got him from Glads. So I think this is just a smart pickup. I think he learned probably a lot from Glads, as well as he was on Charge before that. So I think that is a good pickup, and I think it's something that benefits them a lot. I'm just really, the only thing I'm concerned about Justice is the same thing that I'm concerned about Toronto. Is they've been in this middle rut, and like, can they get out of that middle rut? Right? Like they've been in it, and like they're just stuck in it. Like, are they able to fight and get out? Like, you look at their roster, it's really good. Like, Decay is nuts. We've seen Decay be nuts. Granted, I'd say last season, did we ever see him really pop off? Not really. They played a lot of like 6-man, I believe, and that comp doesn't really play for Decay. It plays a lot more for. I mean, it can play for Decay, depends how they played it, but still, it's not like putting him on Widow, or it's not like putting him on a character where he's just gonna pop off. As well as Happy's insane as well, right? So like, you see these two guys together with Assassin to fill in the gaps. That's a star-studded DPS. That is like a broken DPS lineup. Like, it is just so good. But again, they've had troubles in the past. I'm very curious if they can get this to work. I feel like one of the biggest issues like Justice has had is like playing to their strengths. And the fact of the matter is, they did this when they first time they picked up Decay, I think 2 seasons ago, I believe. At the end of the season, or maybe it was 2 seasons ago, end of the season. They picked up Decay from Dallas. There was a whole ordeal or whatnot. I can go into that, and they made it work. It worked really well. They played a composition that played more for Decay, and Justice just popped off. Like it just did so well, right? I want to see that Justice again. I want to see the Justice which is able to like play more for their team and give more value there, because Mag inherently is an insanely good tank player. Kalios also mechanically not bad. I don't think I wouldn't put him on top, right, with a bunch of other players. He's okay. And Krillin opener, I've watched some Krillin. Krillin's actually not bad at all. He's mechanically really strong. And opener, Vigilante, like, a lot of people might rate him high, but like, I also think he's like like mid tier, right? If I compare him versus like Iris or like Iris to me is like right underneath like Shu, Violet, and those top aimers and flex support. So I'd put Krillin, Vigilante, under that for sure. So again, not the star-studded. It's a better support lineup, but it's not like insane. So I'm hoping they find something that works for them and they're able to play to it. So that's why I think this makes the most sense to me. I think these two are a little bit interchangeable, but this is what I would look at it. Okay, S tier, right? We can sort of even divide it sort of like that now. S tier. Whew. Okay. This is hard, man. This is hard. Because I gotta not be biased. Okay, so I have to put Shock a little bit lower. Okay, man, it's so difficult. Okay, so Shock. I'm always gonna be a big Krusty fan. Always gonna be a big Kasaurus fan, and Ninetech is literally the missing piece that like they needed. Like they've always needed. Like after they lost Junkbuck and I think Junkbuck and Arachne, right? Ninetech is like the old, like he brings back that old like stuff that was missing in my opinion. Not saying other coaches at Shock weren't good. It just brings back that old familiarity, probably with Krusty, as well as working as a team and is comfortable with it. And Ninetech is really, really smart. Like he's probably on the top 10 or top 5, top 10, probably top 7, I'd say, 100% top 7 of like Overwatch coaches in general. Just strategic, like just up there, right? Leader is a bit different, but like easy top 7. I debate top 5. Like he is like really strong. So I think this like lineup is actually really good for coaching. I think mechanically, like we all know Proper is nuts. It's not even a question. Like probably rookie of the year of like this guy's insane. Kilo insane, Finn insane, Violet like it's just an insane lineup. Like all of this is just nuts. Sam, I think he'll have a lot to prove. Bluge, a lot to prove. But I think they will meet that challenge, right? Oh, it is 9K. Sorry, not 9K. It is 9K. My bad. I apologize. So I think they will meet that challenge, and I think with Krusty, Kasaurus, and 9K, I think they will hopefully improve and they will do really well. I'm hoping what happened to Ty, where Ty didn't get a lot of playtime, does not happen to Sam. But I think that this is like a good roster, and I think Sam fills a lot of the holes where Proper and Kilo actually aren't that strong. So this actually looks like a really, really good roster. It's so hard, man. Like this is so difficult. We're gonna keep it over here. We'll keep going through. So Dallas. Okay. I'm a big Rush fan. So he was like probably one of like I was a fan of Rush when I first saw him on Paris, the very start of the season when Ti scrimmed Paris, and I realized that Paris's fundamentals of compositions were just so good. Like we would scrim Shock, we would scrim Paris, we would scrim pretty much everyone actually but Atlanta, I think, in the Western area, and it was super clear to us that at least like to the coaching staff, we probably talked to players about it too, but it was super clear that Shock and like Paris had just insane fundamentals. So it's just like to me like that's why I have such respect for Rush. I really think he's got that down. I think Aid is definitely helped him out. He's aided him. Oh, that's a bad joke. And Rascal, I'm not gonna judge it. I think it's a little interesting, but I'll trust Rush on this. I'll trust Rush on this. I think he deserves that trust. I know he likes to always get someone to grow, so I think that's Gurio. I think something else you have to give Dallas a lot of credit for, and it's exactly what I talked about beforehand, where they didn't have a tracer player and they still made stuff work. Like to me, that is the definition of you have a problem and you can figure out how to solve it, and you actually solve it, right? That is like what is a massive difference between this Rhino being an S tier or even an A tier and like being in like B, C, right? Like if you have some issue, you like fixing the meta, like whatever, the meta doesn't like work for you, you figure out how to make it work for you. So, and all again, all these teams can do that. But Dallas, like with the sim and how they abused sim comps and how they put Sparkle there, it just worked really well. So man, Theo's good. Fielder's good. I mean, I guess the only critique I'd maybe have about this roster is like their backline's good, but they're not mechanically the best. Fielder is like I'd probably say around Iris's level. Like he's good around Iris level, consistent, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Like he's good. Same thing with Chio. I'd probably say the same area. Hanbin, Fearless, definitely top like up there main tank wise. Doha, Edison, your Sparkle, like they're definitely up there as well. So yeah, I think I'd actually put them over here. Just because I'm a little worried about their backline, actually. I think they're a good backline, but I don't think they're the best backline. Glads. Okay. I'm currently in LA right now. So Glads. Base, Kevster, Shoe, Skewed, Funny Astro, Aunts, Rainier, Patty Pad. This is quite and just someone said that like Sparkle picked up Tracer. Sparkle did, but oh sorry, it was that they had no hit scan and they worked around it and he played Tracer, but they still like worked around that is what I'm getting at. And I'm sorry I messed that up earlier. But yeah, so here. I think facing a head coach position is interesting. I think he definitely has experience and he's been around the team enough. So it makes sense. I think that makes sense. Hunter, I'm a big Hunter fan. I guess I'm a little biased because I think I would consider us friends. He was like, yeah. I think he did a lot to Atlanta. When he came to Atlanta, you could see Atlanta just like sort of shoot up too. They did really well when Hunter was there. I even think Hunter and Valiant did really well with packing. So I'm a big Hunter fan. I think I don't know too much about Smash, so I'm not gonna go too much into that. But I would say that every Korean coach I think that Glads has brought in has had somewhat of an impact. So I'm gonna trust that. This roster is just insane. Like if you just look at this, these are literally all top 5 of their role. If you compare this to sort of like, in my opinion, like Atlanta or like Shock, it's just like these players are literally the best. Like these are the best, right? So it's just like as long as you can get it to work, which I think is what they've had trouble with in the past, and I'm pretty sure DP's talked about it. As long as you can get it to work and function, it is a mixed roster, right? And they did get it to work last season. So adapting, but communication again, when a problem strikes, right? Communication barriers. Can you fix that? Can you adapt? Can you see on the same page, eye to eye? There's always going to be a playstyle between AR players and NA players, but making sure that they have a certain playstyle that they enjoy together. But again, like mechanically, these guys are just cracked. Like Kevster is nuts. Like their DPS is just Aunts, Putty, Kevster. It just covers all the roles. I would say that Aunts, I would actually be honest and say that he looked a little weak last season. I don't think he was the same Aunts that I remember playing against Shock and literally like our players having to call a grapple because we just grab every grapple he hit a headshot. So I'm curious to see how he actually does this season because super hot last season. Kevster's always been insane. Rainier, I am so happy for this guy. This guy deserves it. He is nuts. Like when people would be asking me like what player should I look at ball, and they're like what owl player, I'd be like no, forget owl players. You shouldn't be watching owl players. Watch your Rainier. Go look at how that guy min maxes ball and how he manages his uptime because that guy is so good at ball, and I think it just shows in his career how he's like how gone from DPS to ball, and if Doomfist is a tank now, then he can easily play Doom. He came from a DPS role, so this just makes so much sense for him. So I'm really excited for Rainier. I think he'll have a lot to prove, but I think he'll be able to show. And same with Patty. I think Patty will have a lot to prove too. But I think both these players are definitely capable, and I think they have the players around them to support them. So I would probably say, I would do that. I'm sorry if anyone from Atlanta is watching. I'm sorry. I love you guys. I think this is an incredibly close matchup, and it's really really close. I think they have just a little bit of a leg up, just a tad bit. Atlanta. Why I'm putting Atlanta where they are? Because Atlanta also, if you just look at it, like they have a cracked lineup, man. Like it's just insane. Like Gator, I think is if you actually a lot of people think of Gator, they don't think he's actually very good at the game, but you have to realize that when they've utilized Gator, it's not a pop off fashion. Like he's not a pop off hero. He's not playing Ryan or like Orisa, and he can pop off on those heroes. He has to play slow on those heroes for other people to get value. So that's why it may not look like to a lot of people like, oh my god, this guy's like getting like insane kills and he's not like getting a lot of value. But because that's the tempo in which he had to play to get the comp get value. And because he was able to hold space for a while, the team got value. So inherently he was like the silent carry of the team, in my opinion. He also brings that seniority and leadership that to the team that I think is very important. I think Hawk's always been good. There's no question in my mind about it. I think he's probably one of the best Western off tanks. I think it's easily him and Space are up there. I think it depends what you're looking for a player. But I think Hawk's definitely up there. Sorry. And then Kai definitely best hit skin, like easily. I don't think he's ever had an up or down, like my opinion. He's like again like on sort of started really high and then sort of like went down, right? I think he's nuts. And a lot of people like I don't know like people like shit on Nero, but I think Nero is probably one of the best flex DPSs you can ask for. Like I remember like trialing for LA Valiant before they did the shift to APAC, and when they were playing on Maybe Staying, and I was trialing. It was my first interview before I made the top 5 interview. And I knew they weren't going to probably pick me up unless they had a bigger budget, which they weren't going to have a bigger budget, right? But they would need a Korean coach because they had 2 Western coaches and then Korean players, so they're going to pick up a Korean. But if they didn't, then I was sort of next that they were looking at. But in the first one, I think Packing asked me what flex DPS I'd want, and I immediately just said Nero. And I was like, Nero is super flexible. He's mechanically very strong. He learns really fast. I think he's just a great player. So let me also sorry about that. But yeah, so yeah, I think Nero is a great addition. And I think obviously Speedly's gonna come in eventually. And when he comes in, obviously he might get a little more playtime, maybe he won't. But Speedly is easily one of the best flex DPSs. It's not even a question. And then Venom, that guy will tracer gap people. I think there's like very few tracers that are on his level. So and OG Ultraviolet, they may be rookies, but first of all, they bring in synergy and a backline, and I think that's insanely important, especially with metas we've been seeing where you see Brig Zen or even Lucio Bap where peeling is needed. So they already have natural synergy, so that's going to be great, which I think a lot of teams are going to be behind on, as well as both mechanically are very, very strong. I think UV brings qualities that I think are really important. Like it's very hard to see UV make a mistake. If you ever watched his stream, you'll notice UV like very, very, very rarely actually makes a mistake. And I think that's what also just makes him so good. So yeah. And then OG is mechanically like I'd put OG like near Funny Astro, right? Like I think it's very comparable to put OG near Funny Astro. I'd actually say I actually always say he's maybe better than Funny Astro for the fact that OG is more flexible than Funny Astro. Like OG can flex harder. Like I think Funny Astro is really good at Lucio, but I wouldn't say Funny Astro's maybe like Bap if he had to play Bap Zed. I would say Funny Astro's Bap is super strong, whereas OG could probably easily lock the Bap and do like a lot of work. So this roster is really, really, really good. I think the coaching staff, I think legit's a very good manager. I'm gonna try not to talk too much about this because I know too much about it, and I think I'd be biased. But I think they have a great idea of how they're approaching stuff, and I'm really excited to see Atlanta this year. So I'll sort of stop there because I think I'm a bit biased. So I think I'd like do it something like this. Again, it's really hard between these two. These two are like really, really, really close. But that's sort of how I would look at this. And what I will mention before that, and I will add, is like even last season, right? I think I put Outlaws, like when I was doing it privately, I put Outlaws somewhere around here. Because they were in the same thing where it was like, can they get a mixed roster to work? It's really questionable. So they were in this like sort of Florida Boston like thing, and then they got it to work, and literally instantly they were up here. Right? So yeah. That's sort of why they're like down here, and like, they were down here and then they went up. because they just did really well last season. But here, like I said, I think their roster, because their roster and staff, they should be way higher just because of mechanics. So I think, this is my sort of Western look at OWL teams. Next, I'll definitely do an APAC, and then I'll do an overall.